Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Squamish Chamber of Commerce All Candidates Meeting. I'm Dr. Doug Monroe, co-founder of Politikos Research and a professor at Quest University, and I'll be your moderator for this event. Before we formally open the event, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered virtually on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish peoples, and that we are indeed fortunate to live and work in this special place. I'm joined tonight by 10 other people who would normally be up here at the front of a stage with me, but you of course can't see them. So I'll introduce them to you. I'm joined by two members of the Politikos team, Dr. Kaya Belfry-Monroe, also a professor at Quest University. Kaya will be running the Q&A box for tonight's event.
Hello, everyone.
Also from Politikos and also a professor at Quest University, Dr. Andrew Hamilton is in the control room, making sure the technical back end is behaving as expected.
Good evening, everyone.
On behalf of the Squamish Chamber of Commerce, we are joined by Abby Magendy.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. I'm a board director for the Squamish Chamber of Commerce. As the largest business organization in Squamish, it is our honor to work with community partners and Politikos Research to bring the Squamish community this important opportunity to meet our candidates.
Thank you very much, Abby. We are also joined by Clive Stanley of Tourism Squamish.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event. And we are grateful to be part of this event and represent Tourism Squamish.
Thank you very much, Clive. For the Squamish Arts Council, we're joined by Amy Leibenberg.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of the Squamish Arts Council. Thank you to the Chamber and thank you to all the candidates and everyone who's helping to make this possible.
And for the Squamish Chief, we're joined by Jennifer Thuncher.
Hello, thanks for having us. We're really happy to be here, and as well as other people have said, thanks to the candidates and organizers. We're excited to see how it goes.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And of course, the people we are all here to see, the candidates. For the BC Liberal Party, we have Jordan Sturdy.
Good evening, everybody.
For the BC Green Party, we have Jeremy Valeriot.
Hello, everyone.
And for the BC NDP, Keith Murdoch.
Hello, all. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Thank you very much, Jordan, Jeremy, and Keith for joining us. I'd also like to thank all of you who have joined us from your homes, your offices, and various places around Squamish. We currently have 67 audience members, and the numbers continue to climb. Before we get started, I'll give you a brief overview of the event. This evening, we'll be starting with opening statements from all of the candidates following a randomly drawn speaking order. We will then have questions from the sponsor organizations that will be answered by each candidate. This gives you a chance to compare those candidates' positions on some of the issues facing Squamish. We'll then open to questions from the floor that will be answered by one candidate in turn. This lets us cover a bit more ground in terms of the issues and hear from the widest number of people. We'll then turn to closing statements from the candidates and wrap up no later than 8 o'clock. In terms of timing, candidates have 3 minutes for their opening and closing statements and 3 minutes for responses to partner questions. This gives us a bit of a deeper sense of their position on the issues. When you move to questions from the floor, we ask that you keep your questions to 1 minute and candidates keep their responses to 2 minutes so that we can cover more ground. We'll be enforcing the timing by politely interrupting you when your time is up. When we do so, please wrap up what you're saying as gracefully as you can. When then we will move on. If you don't wrap up what you're saying, we will have to just mute your microphone and then move on. Now, of course, when we get to questions from the floor, there are 2 ways for you to ask questions, either verbally or in writing. To ask a question verbally, in Zoom, click on the Raise Hand button. When we give you the floor, we will enable your microphone and you can ask your question. Please make sure you don't have your microphone on mute before you start asking your question. When you ask your question, we will all be able to hear you, but we will not be able to see you. So there's no need to tidy up the room behind you before you ask a question. You may direct your question to a specific candidate, or if you prefer, we will direct it to the next candidate in the speaking order. If speaking in front of a group of people isn't your thing, you can also ask your question in writing by clicking on the Q&A button along the bottom of your screen. You can then type in your question. When it comes up, Kaya will ask it on your behalf to the next candidate in the speaking order. If you do this, please be clear and concise with your questions, and we will ask as many as we can. Now, if you don't see an icon or button marked raise hand or Q&A, look for a symbol that looks like 3 dots in a horizontal line and click on that. On some devices and interfaces, these buttons are hidden in a submenu. And finally, just a reminder that this event is being recorded by the Chamber of Commerce and will be available on their website afterwards. Now, with these logistical details out of the way, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to our candidates for their opening statements. Again, candidates, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Before the event opened, we drew names to determine the speaking order, and our first opening statement will be from Keith for the BC NDP. Keith, over to you.
Thank you so much, Doug. And Doug, I also want to thank you for making the land acknowledgement. I too want to acknowledge that we're on the unceded territories of the Squamish. I also, so like you said, my name is Keith Murdoch. I'm the candidate for the NDP. I have a long history of helping people fight for justice. As an organizer with the United Food and Commercial Workers for more than 15 years, I've helped create long-lasting improvements for workers, their families, and communities across British Columbia. Growing up, my parents operated a small family business, one that my twin brother has now taken over, and my older brother has started his own business. Certainly, the pandemic has certainly affected my family's businesses, just as they have affected many businesses in Squamish and throughout British Columbia. I understand that the stress and anxiety that business owners are feeling right now, as well as their employees. The good news is the NDP has a plan to help businesses, people, and communities recover and thrive once again. I'm proud to be a part of John Horgan's team and looking forward to highlighting what the NDP has done in their last term in office, as well as our plan to build a better future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Our next speaker in the pre-selected random order is Jordan Sturdy for the BC Liberals. Jordan, over to you.
Thank you, Doug. I do want to recognize that we are in the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I happen to be in the territory of the Lilwat right now. I start off by saying that my wife and I live with our adult kids on our farm in Pemberton, and I do feel very fortunate that my kids have gone off to post-secondary and world travels and then have returned back feeling that they want to be in the Sea to Sky and that they have a future here. We operate a family business, an agritourism destination farm, growing 40 to 55 acres of vegetables and berries, and typically would host weddings and events, although I think we all understand that that's not something that's been going on this year. Many of you may have been to North Arm Farm, and so you really do better understand the values that we have and the commitment we've made. I am first and foremost, however, a Vancouver boy. My great-grandfather was Gustav Rody, Vancouver's first bookbinder, and he and my grandmother had a holiday cottage in Horseshoe Bay, which was our first connection to the Howe Sound. My mom currently lives there. My aunt lives on Bowen. We have a cottage in Howe Sound. My brother and sister are in Pemberton, and I got to throw an acknowledgement to my cousin, who's one of the principals of Backcountry. So we are committed to the Sea to Sky. That's where our history is, and that's where our future is. I've worked hard as your MLA on a range of issues in the region over the last number of years, on many things, from Gambier Island issues, moving to expand the Huckabay Provincial Park, to protect glass sponge reefs, brought in a cumulative effects assessment framework to Howe Sound and the Sea to Sky, which is a planning tool that recognizes that the impacts are larger than any one project, but are combined, the combined effects of past, present, and potential future human activity, natural processes. I've tried to advance the notion of a national park proposal for Howe Sound, which evolved into the UNESCO Howe Sound Biosphere Reserve proposal, which is now has the support of the province and been endorsed by the, just recently, actually, a couple of weeks ago, by the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. So this is certainly something moving forward. I've worked with communities throughout the corridor to improve the transportation options, including regional transit services, safety improvements on the highway, and assessments to reduce traffic impact. I seek a balanced approach where people are part of the landscape. I believe in an ecosystem-based management. I'm not an ideologue. Like most farmers, I'm a pragmatist. And I think that those who have dealt with me over the years know that to be true. And like all of you, and including all of my fellow candidates, we are all here because we want to see what we can do to improve the region and we want to see what is best for the region. That's why we're all here. How can any of us look at it any other way? Thank you for coming together, and I look forward to an open and respectful dialogue.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And our third candidate, Mr. Jeremy Valeria for the BC Greens. Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you. Also grateful to be on the shared unceded territories of the Squamish and Lillooet. So I'm Jeremy Valeriot, and I'm proud to be your BC Green candidate. I'm running to be your MLA, well, because I love my family and friends, and I want my daughters to grow up in a world that's safe and healthy for them to bring up their kids and grandkids. My daughters are identical twins, 6 years old, Rose and Nina. They're starting to ask questions about the world, like, where does the recycling go, Dada? Why are the glaciers melting? And who is this Donald Trump guy? So I've been skiing, hiking, and visiting friends in the corridor for nearly 30 years, from Birkenhead to Garibaldi Park, and Garibaldi Peak to Howe Sound. Our family moved here for the opportunity to have fun in a beautiful natural setting and to live and work in a vibrant community. And because of the grounded, progressive thinking, forward-thinking spirit of the people who live here and the tight-knit community. I'm a professional engineer, which means I'm also a pragmatist. I studied geological engineering at UBC quite a while ago and worked in the environmental field most of my career. I understand the business environment as a consultant. I worked on different projects, land development, mining, energy, and forestry. And I understand local government. I worked as staff managing waste programs like the ones you have in Squamish, organics, recycling, and residual garbage, along with all the other waste reduction programs. And yes, I was a town councillor in Gibsons for 4 years. I led or supported a whole bunch of environmental initiatives, including compost program, transportation improvements, electric vehicle chargers. The council I worked with were also fiscally responsible. We worked well together, even though we didn't always agree. We put money aside for asset replacement, took a pioneering approach to recognizing and valuing natural assets. And I just finished a master's degree project in leadership studies, researching natural asset management. The West Van Sea to Sky is full of hardworking, smart people who see that the future is green. And we have to build back smarter and better after the pandemic that's deeply affected us all. We need sustainable economic development that puts us squarely in the economy of the future and takes climate health into account. We can reimagine our relationship with each other, with ourselves and our planet, and we can understand that we're all interconnected. We can work together to restore the social fabric, find our way in a new economic reality, and protect this place that we all know is very special. So I'm willing to work hard and work smart to represent the people of this riding as your MLA, and it's time to send a green MLA to Victoria to build on this model of collaboration. It's the best way to find solutions to the challenges that we all face together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And thank you to all candidates for your opening statements. It's nice to have the ground set. We're going to now enter the panelist questions. So these are questions prepared by the sponsor organizations. They'll be asked by a representative of the organizations and answered by each candidate in turn, again, following our randomly drawn order. The first question goes to the Squamish Chamber of Commerce. Abby, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. The Squamish Chamber of Commerce is the oldest and largest business organization in the Squamish community, with members across various sectors, from manufacturing to technology. Around 1 in 5 Squamish Chamber members are directly part of the tourism sector. Accommodation, activities, food and beverage. In addition, tourism touches many other members, such as cleaning firms, film and media, event producers, marketing, and other professional services. The Chamber's question is, consumer-facing businesses, tourism, hospitality, retail, activities, F&B, events, have been especially hard hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. If elected, what would your party do to support small businesses through the pandemic? Thank you.
Okay, so our first big question of the evening, and our first response goes to Keith. Keith, again, 3 minutes, over to you.
3 minutes and counting. All right. So certainly economics is one of the things that certainly differentiates the NDP from the Liberals and the Greens. Certainly, you know, the Greens and Liberals, in my view, they seem to be more supportive of supporting big businesses like Vail, where the NDP are focused in helping those who need it, the small and medium local, the small and medium-sized businesses that are local. The Liberals have failed to provide British Columbia with an economic recovery plan to review before they vote. When Wilkinson was asked, hey, what's the deals in your economic plan? He replied, the details aren't important. A response like this seems pretty crazy to me. If I was buying a car and was asked how much it would cost, and I was told by the salesperson, don't worry about it, those details aren't important, just sign here, I wouldn't trust them. All of this is telling me that the Liberals don't have a plan, but the NDP does. Before COVID hit, the NDP introduced 3 balanced budgets while improving services for people. We've created 60,000 jobs and had the lowest unemployment in Canada, with an average wages going up 17% over 3 years. If elected, I will continue to work with John Horgan and the BC NDP to support small business while making sure that people can access good, suitable jobs in the Sea to Sky corridor. We have already invested $8 billion to support the economy and get it kick-started. The NDP is now have plans to create a new recovery investment fund that will deliver an additional $3 billion a year over 3 years. These funds will be used to build new hospitals, schools, and other infrastructure projects, creating 18,000 jobs each year. We're also offering grants to medium and small sized businesses to help them operate as well as to help them employ the people that need the jobs the most. This $300 million grant is protecting 200,000 jobs. We have also introduced a PST rebate on machinery and equipment that would also help these employers buy equipment and get their operations to where they need to be in this new COVID world. Now, specifically to tourism, it was a long-winded way to get to the areas that you really wanted to hear about.
I'm sorry, Keith. I'm afraid that has been 3 minutes. Can you please finish the sentence?
All right. So we've invested $100 million towards tourism. My quick close is going to be we have a plan for tourism, restaurants, and altogether. I understand the importance and impact small businesses play in the local economies and believe that they're worth investing in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thank you for that graceful closer when the time was up. Jordan, we'll turn over to you now for a response to this question from the Squamish Chamber.
Thank you. Yes, Small business right across British Columbia is the foundation of business in British Columbia. I think 99% of all businesses in the province are in fact small businesses with less than 50 employees. And that really dominates the sea to sky. And these businesses are always challenged because they have limited access to financial tools, and always challenges around rental costs and access to labor. This is not a new challenge, but COVID has certainly added another dimension. I have to go back a little bit to what colleague mentioned around supporting business, and one of those pieces around the impacts on business with regard to the employer's health tax, for example, which it really provides or demonstrates a real disconnect in terms of what's important, where small or the equation is, or the assessment is, that big payroll equals big profits. Anybody with a big payroll should be paying a significant, well, a couple of percent of their payroll in tax, which frankly just really doesn't connect with the realities around running a small business. We've put in place a number of, there's a number of things. There's certainly, we've rolled out in the last few days a proposition that we would waive or eliminate the PST for this year over the course of for 1 year, and then reduce it to 3% the following year, and then we'll reassess following that. This will help people decide or help people reinvest. It'll leave money with you as opposed to taking your money and then giving it back to you, which seems to be the strategy for you right now. There's a variety of other initiatives that we need to look at specific to Squamish, looking at how we can free up employment lands in the district. There's certainly lands there that we need access to, that we need a plan for site servicing to, and we haven't been able to make any progress with the current government, or the current coalition government, on putting something together that opens up the Squamish North, BC Rail North Yards to a variety of different businesses. What needs to happen there is a plan with infrastructure put in place, and a subdivision plan and servicing. This is 90 acres of land that can really be an innovation hub, that can be a site for many different kinds of businesses, and the diversification of employment in Squamish and the corridor. It's a fine spot that's got access to rail, that's got access to the highway, and is right in the center of town. So it's certainly a great opportunity for Squamish.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And our third answer for this question from Abby in the chamber goes to Jeremy. Jeremy, over to you.
Thanks for the question. As like the others, I agree that tourism underpins our local economy. It employs our friends and our neighbors and our family, and these small businesses are a perfect example of green jobs, sustainable jobs, the economy of the future, showing off our beautiful region and our environmental stewardship to the world. So they have been hardest hit by the pandemic, definitely. People are hurting. They're just getting by. I think the government's response to tourism has been underwhelming. The task force will release a report at the end of December. Well, that's too late. We need that now. So our leader, Sonia Furstenau, was in Whistler yesterday. Very pleased to have her announcing rent subsidy, $300 million for over 6 months to help people through the next 6 months of difficult time. We'd also, and this application process would be simple. The uptake on current rent subsidy hasn't been great. Make it a very simple application. Retool provincial grants for tourism, repayable loans for hospitality. But I think the key is that we are ready to welcome back regional and domestic visitors. We've maybe been a little focused on the international visitor, and people are coming from all over BC. They're seeing the sea to sky with new eyes, or for the first time. And people are coming from across Canada, and I think it's good. There, as with some of the other sustainable green sectors, the government absolutely needs to invest in tourism and small business. Possibly there's a few options for that. The municipal and regional district tax, the hotel tax, could help. Honestly, one of the biggest obstacles to tourism is staff and the housing problem, and I'm sure we'll talk about housing a bit later on. There is no evidence to suggest that the Greens favor big business over small business. In fact, I'd say that's opposite. And to be honest, tax cuts, PST cut, that's old thinking. A PST cut to it's been shown that tax cuts don't work. We can't afford to shred our social fabric and social safety net at a time like this by cutting taxes and reducing revenues. That's not responsible. That's not responsible policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I'd just like to remind everybody in the audience that we will be taking questions from the floor after we have moved through questions from partner organizations. But if you have a question that occurs to you now, you don't need to wait. You can open the Q&A box of Zoom, type your question in now, and it will be in the queue waiting to be asked when we open to questions from the floor. You will also be able to ask questions live by raising your hand, and we'll reiterate how to do that when we get to the next phase of the debate. For now, though, moving along in our questions from partner organizations, we have a question on behalf of Tourism Squamish from Clive. Clive, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be able to represent such an important sector for Squamish, such a great contributor to tourism and the workforce and commerce in Squamish. So our question goes out to the candidates, and it's sort of twofold, but it starts basically, how would your party plan in getting the people back to work in order to free up that discretionary income, make it available for tourism spending? And how will your party help to rebuild the tourism sector into once again becoming one of BC's leading industries and elevate its priority amongst the business sectors regarding investment and policy post-COVID-19?
Thank you very much, Clive. Again, continuing on the vein of tourism, the pandemic and economic recovery. Keith, you have the first crack at this one. Over to you.
Thank you. Well, it looks like I lucked out with another tourism question, so I can continue the little pieces that I missed. I wasn't able to get in on the first one. Certainly, to try to get tourism up and going again, I agree that we need to get folks locally within BC and nationally coming into the area. Certainly, I don't feel that the US border and international borders will be opening anytime soon. So certainly it's going to be quite a challenge for the region. But the reality is the pandemic is going to end. So when it comes down to investment, that is what's most important for the tourism industry. I think is the government needs to do what they can do to try to help the tourism industry get through this storm. The NDP have already dedicated $100 million towards tourism and have been promoting the province's tourist industry through Explore BC. So we certainly have a lot of advertising that's happening through Explore BC to try to encourage people to come to the province. A lot of those efforts used to be international. That will now be shifted logically. That will now be shifted to start targeting Canadians because they're the ones that can come to the region. Certainly for the folks in the sea to sky area, it's the best place in the province. So there is a lot of people who are interested in coming to this area, and you have a summer season that has a lot of fun things happening, from the mountain biking to the hiking to the rock climbing, but then there's the winter stuff. And I think Whistler is mostly known for the winter tourism. And certainly I believe the government will be helping the ski industry in this coming winter season. So in addition to that $100 million in May of this year, tourism specifically received over $70,000 from the government on a tourism grant. So certainly getting funds into your community is one good way to start to try to help these businesses survive. Specifically with restaurants, there's been a lot of collaboration between local governments, municipal governments in the province to try to find creative ways to help these businesses survive. And there's been expansions of service areas such as patios that has helped them, as well as allowing them to purchase alcohol wholesale prices, and even allowing restaurants to do delivery and takeout. So there's certainly, I understand the importance of tourism in this region. It's one of the main sources of one of the main job producers, and certainly it's one that I've taken great notice to. Thank you.
Keith, you managed to wrap that up just as I was coming in on time. Nicely done.
I saw it on your face.
Jordan, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. It was interesting to hear the comment that that taxes are good and that more taxes are better, and that we know essentially better because we'll tax you and then we'll provide you with an opportunity to perhaps get it back. And yeah, there is a fundamental difference in that philosophy. So as I said, we've provided a PST big waiver for the next year is the plan, as well as there was an announcement today that the 2% small business tax would be eliminated as well. In addition, there's a program being proposed for small business loan guarantees, and this is to help these small businesses with that cash flow issue and with uncertainty in the market. That said, this is an acute situation that we're facing right now with regard to COVID. The international visits, in my view, will be coming back. We will be seeing a return over the period of time to normal, but it'll be really a new normal. So for the next, we saw that the visits for this summer in a regional fashion were quite strong. Once we got to the fall, though, it dropped off in midweek, and this is posing real challenges to businesses around the region, and will pose more challenges over the course of this winter. So this is where the potential for loan guarantees and supports can be very important. So there is, we still need to maintain an international presence, though, and make sure that our marketing, while focusing on the regional visits right now, will transition back into the international market, because we know that the international market does spend more money than a regional. So one of those issues, or one of those other commitments, would be to ensure that we are, and communities do, remain whole with the MRDT. Despite the fact that we've seen some significant drop in revenues, and because that really does fund the marketing and experience for the tourism sector in right around the province. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And then Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you, Doug. I'm really glad this question came around again, because I missed the most important part, which is the Green Party is part of as your MLA. First thing we need to do is to listen. Tourism organizations, chambers of commerce, they're the ones who know what's required. We need to hear them, what their experience is on the ground, and listen carefully and come up with the best decisions based on the best information, not ideological reasons. So this is the time for government spending to help us through this crisis. We definitely need to look at long-term resilience to other crises or other downturns like this. But this is the time for government spending, and I'm uncomfortable with the amount of debt we're racking up, especially at the federal level. And we really need to start thinking about how we pay it back. Green Party is not talking about raising taxes, but we're talking about maintaining stable revenue so that we don't go further into debt, which is also very bad for the economy. So, this is the jewel of the tourism industry. This region, not all of BC has the same dependence on tourism. Really, what I would say is that with a minority government and a Green MLA, you're gonna have much better representation for the Sea to Sky. We don't have this seesaw of one party ignoring part of one riding in the province because it's not represented by, they don't have an MLA represented. The Sea to Sky can benefit from government investment in the tourism industry, and as generally I'd fight for it, and I'd have a really good platform to fight for it rather than being in opposition. So we don't need more taxes, but we sure can't start getting rid of the revenue we have. We won't be able to pay for any of the things that we need. Housing, some of the programs that have been eroded by 16 years of BC Liberals, and then the ones that have not been necessarily restored under this current government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. This brings us to our question from the Squamish Arts Council. Amy, over to you for your question, please.
Thank you, Doug. Arts, culture, and heritage have always been an integral component of a vibrant and resilient society and economy. Now, more than ever, we are leaning on arts and culture to connect communities and to help with our emotional and mental well-being. Does your party support funding for the arts in BC, and is increased funding a priority for your party?
Thank you very much, Amy. Keith, once again, you are top of the draw for this question.
Thank you for that question. So certainly the arts is very important. It gives so much meaning to so many people's lives. I myself, that I don't know which shoulder it is, that painting over my shoulder, my wife painted that. So certainly art is important to me and my family, and it's something that can help really elevate people's lives. Certainly when it comes down to arts, when it comes down to the ministry, that ministry actually, arts and culture actually falls with tourism. I'm not going to segue to talk more about tourism. I think we've covered the important things there. But certainly the NDP, we've been through the NDP Recovery Fund. Certainly, I think we can expand the $2 million arts infrastructure project to help communities, as well as moving past that. There's also a lot of initiatives right now with the provincial government to try to encourage more Indigenous culture projects and trying to fund projects that will cherish and document First Nation languages. So certainly the NDP understands the importance of the arts and would be interested in supporting them in moving on into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Jordan, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, arts does tie communities together and builds community, and has unfortunately over the course of the last number of months really been seriously affected by opportunity, as we have limited events. We would on our farm hire or engage performance artists or performers to as part of the events, as part of weddings and that sort of thing, and that is all really just vanished over the course of this pandemic, and that's something that we will have to overcome and hope that we get through this pandemic and get a vaccine in place as soon as possible, so that we can again get back to that live art and live performance art. The BC Liberals have long supported the arts, have very much been committed to, for example, film and animation, film festivals, the digital film and animation, tax credits. There's obviously that is a piece of art, which maybe wasn't entirely what you were talking about, but certainly a big commitment and a big part of our economy. Really the we need to ensure that the community gaming component of the grant programs are intact and made whole, because that's something that is really does underpin the arts community, and from writers festivals to dance festivals to live performance. And this is a critical piece, and that has not necessarily been as robust and as well understood and as accessible as it needs to be. And we would certainly commit to making sure that those programs and those access to those funds is enhanced. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And Jeremy, your turn.
Thank you. Start my clock. I think we all agree that arts are essential to community. They bring us together. They promote cross-cultural understanding. There's certainly an Indigenous component of common understanding, common ground that come into the arts as well. So our arts, the Green Party is pretty clear. Arts fit very well together with social and environmental justice and environmental stewardship. They can also be used to increase awareness of things that you wouldn't expect. I sit on the board of an arts organization that helped people to engage with natural assets. So it's kind of a technical, it can be a technical topic. It's not necessarily the most interesting, but when you bring in an arts component, you really can engage people in awareness of all sorts of different things. And the tagline for that awareness is creative community building. And I think that's really what the arts can represent. So as your MLA at BC Arts Council and Creative BC are the funding agencies, would go to the bat for the region in that sense. Arts, they're an essential part of a civil society. There's so many ways. The same organization has a project with seniors who are experiencing dementia, which has been life-changing for seniors living with dementia and people understanding their experience. There are so many ways, and yes, certainly live arts have been suffering, and I feel for my friends who are musicians and are playing on Zoom. It's okay to run an all candidates meeting. It's not so great for your musical experience or any kind of theatrical performance. So we're all in agreement. I would say that the BC Green Party takes these things to heart, the indicators of social health, social cohesion, and their impact on mental health is pretty hard to understate. It's the arts touch every part of our lives, and they bring us together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We then turn to Jennifer Thuncher from the Squamish Chief for our fourth panelist question.
Thanks, Doug. So we're on the cusp of a long weekend, and most Squamish locals don't get in their cars and go on the highway on long weekends most of the year. A lot of residents and the local government have fought for a long time or advocated for regional transit, and we still don't have it. So would you or your party get it done in the first year, or what's the holdup with regional transit in our area?
It would not be an all candidates meeting in Squamish without the regional transit question. So thank you, Jennifer, for bringing that up. Keith, as always, you are top of the draw for this question. Over to you. Once again there, Keith, over to you for Jennifer's question.
Sorry about that, just having, it's not a Zoom call unless you have a little, technology issues. So certainly when it comes to transit, when it comes to regional transit, we all know that it's something that the entire community wants. It's something that the NDP want to help fund. But then we ran into this challenge when it comes down to finding a funding model that would work. I agree that public transit is what is the most effective way to get people out of their cars, try to reduce the volume of people on the Sea to Sky Highway. When residents can't, when locals and residents throughout the corridors are uncomfortable to go onto the highway because they know how much traffic is coming, that's not a good thing. That is something that needs to be addressed. I recently was at the Carver Engineering announcement from the NDP, where we announced our plan to have a net zero emissions by 2050. And I took that opportunity to talk to John Horgan about specifically transit and the challenges within this community, because it's absolutely essential for regional transportation to happen, as well as interregional, connecting Squamish to Vancouver and connecting you all to the network. John assured me, and we actually, at the time, Mayor Elliott was there, and John reassured your mayor that the NDP is completely committed to finding a funding structure that will work. Certainly there's challenges there's some challenges within your region specifically of price gouging with gas, and that the fuel within your region, there's basically already, they're charging you like there's already a transit tax associated to it. The NDP government is committed to go after these gas companies who are overcharging customers within this region. That would then create some space for a transit tax to be put in from municipalities, and that will hopefully help solve some of the funding issues that municipalities are finding themselves into. So just to echo once again, I completely understand the importance of it. I and the NDP are dedicated towards it. And if I'm your MLA and we have a majority government, I'm certain regional transportation is something that everyone in the Sea to Sky corridor will see quite soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith, for that answer. Jordan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, that would be a little more believable if there was a demonstrated commitment by this government, by the NDP, to actually fund regional transit. There's a consensus amongst all local governments, the municipalities, the regional district, and the 2 First Nations, that there's a funding formula that actually works. And it's been something that we've been advocating for 3 or 4 years now. And that is a regional transit levy, a fuel levy, to fund the 25-year transportation plan for the Sea to Sky. The NDP seemed to want to have it the local government share, which is just about 51% of the cost of providing the service, less the fare box, which it goes to local government as well. But the NDP want, and their Green partners, I guess, because they certainly weren't united in moving this forward, want to have it based on property taxes. And unfortunately, that is just frankly unequitable. And I've heard that from the previous minister on numerous occasions, and request to go back to be more creative about it. The reality is that there is property taxes, or 60% of the property taxes in the Sea to Sky are paid by Whistler. And that would, if local government was contributing or was basing the local government share on property taxes, Whistler would be paying 65% of the cost of providing the service. And yeah, and that might be something good for Squamish, because at the end of the day, Squamish is going to be the chief beneficiary as per the transit plan. There's going to be connections into Vancouver or from Squamish as well as into Whistler. There would be the bulk of the service would originate in Squamish and expand as time goes on and more revenues available. But the other component of this is that we would be, if we were able to put in place a 2.5-cent transit tax or fuel tax to service transit, that it would also capture fuel purchased by tourists. And currently we're selling about 60 million liters of fuel in the Sea to Sky. About 20% of that's purchased by tourists. So there's a contribution there, and there's also an opportunity then for First Nations to be contributing, because which they have agreed to do. And this would be something that we had a commitment from the BC Liberal government prior to 2017 to action this item. I think there's lots of, I advocated on behalf of and alongside all the local government representatives over the course of a number of years. And we were unfortunately not able to move.
Thank you very much, Jordan.
NDP
That is
on
3
this
minutes.
issue.
Can you please wrap up your current sentence?
Oh, I'm fine. Thanks very much.
Nicely done. All right, thank you. And then Jeremy, over to you on regional transit.
Thanks, Doug. I mean, I'm an engineer. It's pretty hard as an engineer and having an analytical mind not to be fascinated with the systems aspect of transportation and transit. It's such a complex thing, as people who watch the Sea to Sky Highway know. I mean, yes, it's predictable Friday evening and Sunday evening, but you never know when things are going to get dicey on that highway. Let's not forget that regional transit is actually about people. It's about quality of life that depends on comfortable, safe transportation options, so people can work, check their email, check their social media, or rest while they commute. So it's key to economic development. People should be able to get to work without spending half their, or a good chunk of their paycheck on a private vehicle. COVID has impacted transit. It's one of the big impacts that's going to take a while to dig out of. But if we start planning for rebirth of transit in the next year or two now, it'll be ready in time for our green recovery. Yeah, there's an opportunity on fuel prices. We should be getting a share of the federal tax. I absolutely do not think that property tax is an appropriate way to fund transit. It's the user pay. It's not the appropriate thing. Perhaps an additional fuel tax, but also the share of the tax that we're already paying on our fuel. So there are outside the box innovative funding options we can get there. We also, as the Party of Innovation, we're pretty keen on assessing what technologies are going to bring us. Autonomous vehicles as one example. Of course, there's an academic study of a proposed rail line, a bullet train, which is interesting to look at. I supported regional transit when I was on the Sunshine Coast Regional District Board, and I have experience with the interagency cooperation that needs to make it happen. The fact is, neither the BC Liberals nor the NDP have been able to make this happen. It should not be this hard. Lots of places have regional transit. There's a roadblock. All I can say is, as your MLA, I will push through that roadblock and get us the regional transit that this region both deserves and needs. And I mean, on top of all the other reasons, it is responsible. It's the responsible thing to do for carbon emissions and for highway congestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you very much to our partner organizations. We've heard about supporting tourism, we've heard about getting people back to work, we've heard about the arts, and we have heard about regional transit. But we have many more issues in Squamish, and now it's time to hear from you in the audience. Once again, there are two ways you can ask a question to our candidates. One is verbally. You can click on the raise hand button in Zoom. We will then call upon you when the moment presents itself and enable your microphone. Before you speak, you will need to unmute your microphone so that we can hear you. And as I said earlier, we won't be able to see you, so there's no need to tidy your room. Or if you prefer not to ask your question in front of everyone, you can type it into the Q&A box, and Kaya will read it on your behalf to the candidates. That way everybody hears the question and the answer. You can, in both modes, direct questions to specific candidates, or you can just it's an open question and we will direct it to the next candidate in the speaking order. Now I see that we have some questions in the Q&A box, so Kai, I'm going to pass it over to you for our first question from the floor.
Thank you, Doug. Our first question is for Keith. Could you please explain why the NDP are continuing to support Deep Well Royalty Program and what your views are on that program? Thank you.
You have to talk to them.
Hello. So great question. When it comes down to any energy development program, I'm not super familiar with this one, but I'm taking the impression that it's a climate/natural resource development question. One of the things that the NDP is quite proud of is the Clean BC plan that is the most ambitious climate plan on the entire continent. We have a lot of provisions within that plan to ensure that polluters are limited by what they can do and that we're looking out for the environment. Like I said, I was at Carbon Engineering in Squamish last week with John Horgan, where we announced our plan to go to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. That will be achieved in a variety of ways, from reducing the amount by having regulations to reduce the amount of pollution by polluters, but also with great technologies that will come in the years to come. Example would be what Carbon Engineering does is they literally take CO2 out of the air to reduce the effects of greenhouse gases in our environment. But I will certainly look into that issue a little bit more thoroughly, and I hope I answered it well enough for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. We have quite a backlog of questions in the Q&A. Over to you, Kai.
The next question is for Jordan Sturdy. As a parent of a transgender child, I want to ask what you are going to do to keep your party accountable for its anti-LGBTQ stance, as witnessed by Andrew Wilkinson's refusal to sanction, by which I believe the person means discipline, 2 candidates who support discriminatory policies.
Thank you for the question. It's been clearly stated again and again that there is no room in the BC Liberal Party for hate of any sort towards LGBTQ people, in terms of age discrimination, in terms of any minority group. That there is no excuse for it, and there's no tolerance for that. And Mr. Wilkinson has been very clear about that, and that we don't tolerate any bias or any bigotry or any hate. And I know Mr. Thronis personally, and who's one of the people that I think that this question is oriented towards. And while we're not aligned on all things, I am confident that he's a man that is very tolerant and is loving of all people. I think we're a broad tent party, and there's a range of different views, and we tolerate different views. But the stand of the party is that there is no room for hate or bigotry in British Columbia or in BC Liberal Party.
Thank you, Jordan. Our next question is to candidates generally. This past summer, we saw an unprecedented amount of demand for outdoor experiences. Meanwhile, provincial parks were shut down and access was limited while people needed them most. What sort of future do you imagine for BC's chronically underfunded and overcrowded provincial parks to keep them accessible and healthy in Squamish and in the Sea to Sky?
Okay, thank you. And in keeping with our speaking order, Jeremy, why don't you take this one?
Thank you. There's no doubt that parks have been underfunded for a long time. You shouldn't have to have a charitable foundation to keep your jewel natural assets functioning. It would come as no surprise that the Green Party is in favor of better funding for parks. They are the most important piece of they represent recreation. They represent especially in the last 6 months, they represent real potential for improved physical and mental health, and they are essential. Work on natural assets suggests that they have value far beyond what's accounted for by the government. So the Green Party hasn't made a specific announcement on parks. I recognize that that some others have taken this up as an issue. The overcrowding requires better management. I'm aware of the day pass program. We would use the evidence coming out of that to assess whether that's an appropriate approach. But there's no doubt that they need to be better staffed. There needs to be more people on the ground to educate the users of the parks, to make sure that they're being used properly. And the BC Green Party will take better care of parks, without a doubt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We're now going to go to the verbal questions. We have 2 audience members with their hands patiently up. Admittedly, a bit easier when it's a button rather than a physical hand in the air. Our first question is from Stephen Chua. Stephen, your mic is now live. Please stand by. Stephen's using an older version of Zoom, so we're going to bring him back in. There you are. Stephen, you can now ask your question. Please unmute your microphone and go ahead. Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties from Stephen. So while he's sorting that out, hopefully we can get that figured. We're going to turn to our next question from the floor, Cameron Cope. Cameron, we are going to promote you to a panelist. You'll be able to activate your microphone and ask your question.
Hi there, my name is Cameron Cope. I'm a director of the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I've got a general policy question for any candidate. If the position of your party or party leader wasn't in the best interests of your constituents, what would you do? Can you give an example?
As a professor of politics, this is one of my favorite questions when it comes up in a debate, and in our random speaking order, Keith, this one goes to you.
Goody, I wanted to answer this one. Quite simple. Certainly, you know, your job, my job as your MLA is to represent you, to represent the constituents. Certainly, you'll get into times where you'll have company policy that may differ from what your constituents want. But it's going to be always going to be challenging to find the balance between the two. But at the end of the day, my view is I work for you, and my job is to represent you the best way as I can. And even if your views are different from my party's, I have a responsibility, I have an obligation, frankly, to bring your voices to Victoria, to make it perfectly clear that the folks in Sea to Sky disagree with something that the government is doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. We're going to make one more crack at Stephen Chua's question. Stephen, are you hearing us, and can you ask your question? Okay, it seems like we're still having some technical difficulties there. Luckily, there's a long list of questions in the Q&A box. So Kaya, over to you for the next question.
Thank you, Doug. The next question is generally for all candidates. Do the candidates feel that there is a future for the LNG industry in BC?
That is definitely clear, concise, short and to the point. Thank you very much. Jordan, you are next in our speaking order. This question is to you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I believe that there is a future for liquefied natural gas industry in British Columbia. There's clearly a global demand for liquefied natural gas, although the economics of it certainly are changing as clean energy technologies are more rapidly adopted around the world, and so they should be. But we are in British Columbia and in Canada ethical producers. We have amongst the highest standards, environmental standards in the world. We have a very transparent system, and we have we deal with our Indigenous people in a fair way when it comes to resource management. So the idea that we should not be part of a global market for natural gas would simply be abdicating that responsibility, or not so much responsibility, but opportunity to perhaps less ethical producers, and harming our economy, or disadvantaging us and advantaging others. So I believe that there's a short window here. There's probably a 20, 30-year window where natural gas will remain in demand. And I don't see any reason that we shouldn't be part of that market, always trying to use the best technology, the best practices to try and be the best producer, the cleanest producer, the most responsible producer in the world.
Thank you very much, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. The next question is, again, generally for any candidate. Hate crime against Asian Canadians has increased during the pandemic, while issues of anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism have also been highlighted. If elected, what would your priorities be to address racism in this riding and across the province?
An issue that's front of mind for many of us at the moment. Jeremy, you are next in our speaking order. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the question. I would have really liked to answer the other two as well. That's not the way that this works, but I also, this one is extremely important as well. There's no room for discrimination or hate sentiment of any kind in this world. We need to rise above that, and we need to learn to live together in a way that where we can speak to each other with respect and courtesy. It's, I can't really go on because it's pretty clear cut. It's black and white to me that this is not okay. It's an issue of education and awareness for sure, and that will take time. There's a generational change that's occurring, and we're seeing the results of how slow that generational change is, particularly south of the border, but also here with Asian Canadians and Indigenous people, and it's not acceptable. I think we all know that. How do we address it? Many different ways, but it's something that needs to pervade the entire system. We need to nip it in the bud at every opportunity, whether it's a simple verbal comment where we take the personal leadership to step forward and say that that's not okay, right down to the enforcement of it in the courts if that's what's needed. So the answer is clear that this is not acceptable, and I've heard other mentions of this problem. I don't believe that the Green Party has a problem in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Our next question. Nonprofit organizations provide valuable support for our communities. Many have been hard hit during COVID-19 with events and fundraising activities not possible. What will your party do to support nonprofits during the pandemic?
Thank you very much for that question. Keith, our speaking order has come back around to you for this question.
Thank you. So yeah, I personally, I work for a nonprofit. I understand the challenges it is to find the funding to be able to run your programs. And when you're living in a pandemic with a lot of people out of work, certainly being able to find donations from folks will be extremely difficult. I don't have a quick answer and a clear answer on a funding structure or a grant or something that will apply to people in nonprofits whose organizations are reliant on donations. But it's now on my radar, and I will gladly talk to my colleagues and talk to people within the party to see if we can look at trying to find some kind of solution, because there's so much valuable work that nonprofits do for our communities, and their survival needs to be paramount, and they need to be considered during this pandemic, as well as all the businesses. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Keith. We're now going to try going around to questions verbally from the floor once again. You've noticed you've had a few technical troubles with that tonight. As Keith said earlier, it wouldn't be a Zoom call if you didn't have technical hiccups. As it turns out, for those of you running an older version of the Zoom software, we will need to temporarily promote you to a panelist in order for you to ask your question. That's perfectly fine, of course, but it does mean that we will see you as you ask your question. So this is your moment to frantically tidy up the background before you ask your question, if you like. We have a few people with hands up. We're going to go to Jackie Menezes for the next question. Jackie, your microphone is active. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Doug. Jackie Menezes, Board Director with the Squamish Chamber of Commerce. This question is for all candidates. If elected, what will be the economic priorities for your government to grow professional and living wage jobs for Squamish?
An excellent question, Jackie. Thank you. Jordan, you are next up in our speaking order, so this question goes to you.
Thank you. Well, specifically for Squamish, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a tremendous opportunity with the BC Rail North Yards for growing employment opportunities and diversification of employment opportunities. This is, as I said, a 90-acre site that is a brownfield site that is minimally utilized at this point. That has limited services, which is one of the pieces that needs to be put in place. But I think more importantly, there needs to be a subdivision plan and a commitment from government to utilize the site for the benefit of Squamish. There is interest and opportunity for everything from film to green tech to biotech. To value-added forestry. As I say, it's a brownfield site with an excellent location that simply needs a subdivision plan and a servicing plan to, and also incidentally has a commitment and a partnership with the Squamish Nation to, because they have a reserve that's associated with it. And this is a site that could literally generate thousands of jobs over time. And we have to get, there's a part of it that would need to be reserved for the port, because there's a need for a laydown with the port as well. But nonetheless, there's still at least 80 acres that could be utilized for employment opportunities and diversification of jobs and a focus on the new economy.
Thank you very much, Jordan. We also have another question in the raised hands. This question is from Star. Star, your mic is now live. Please unmute and ask your question. Once again, we have a user identified as Star who has their hand up. Star, please unmute and ask your question. All right, well, we'll come back around to that one in a few minutes, possibly off getting a cup of coffee, as one can do in a Zoom meeting, of course. We notice that we have a steadily climbing number of questions in the Q&A box. Thank you, everyone, for keeping your questions coming. I'm sure our candidates appreciate this opportunity to answer your questions on the issues. Kaya, over to you for our next question.
Doug, I have Stephen Chua's question from the chief. He got booted out and has now asked it through the Q&A. Many parents have been complaining about the possibility of school exposures, and this has become a reality several times in Squamish. What is your stance on education during the pandemic? Should we be switching to a hybrid online education model? If not, then why not?
A question front of mind for parents in Squamish these days. Jeremy, you are our next speaker. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Great question. Top of mind for every parent of school-age kids, and I'm one of them. My kids are in grade 1 at Myrtle Phillip in Whistler, and I spoke to the principal and I dropped them off this morning. It's just a matter of time, and we've been lucky so far. I know Squamish hasn't been so lucky. So the key here, I think, is listening to the experts. Provincial Health Officer Bonnie Henry, school board officials that have had months to plan for this. They did a trial run in June, and they are now living it day in, day out, keeping an eye on things. Every day brings new information about the COVID pandemic. It's my understanding, based on what I read in early September, when my spouse and I were deciding whether to send our kids back to school, that there are options for online learning, and I think that's really important. Those options were provided. It is every parent's choice and every parent's difficult decision, and I feel for both sides that parents need to go to work. They need the school system to work, and yet there's risk involved. So I fundamentally think that the schools are being well managed. I think the outbreaks that have happened sound like they've been well managed from what I understand, and we have to forge ahead. We need to allow options for people who are not comfortable sending their kids to school, and that's important. Some parents are creating their own options, and that's okay in the times we're in. People are adapting in every different way. But fundamentally, I believe we have to listen to people who are trained and educated to solve to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. On the topic of childcare, we've read about what the parties are doing across BC, but we'd like to ask our local candidates what they've would do to boost childcare spaces, specifically here in Squamish. In particular, how to attract childhood educators to staff new childcare spaces to meet the demand for babies and toddlers under 3 years old.
And our speaking order continues to roll. Keith, you are up. Over to you.
Thank you. So certainly childcare is something that the NDP is quite proud of, something that we've started our programs for $10 a day. But first, let me say, I believe in childcare does not only help families, but it also helps our economy by getting parents back into the workforce. I think it's something that's worth investing in. Unfortunately, the BC Liberals ignored the needs of BC families and what BC's businesses said, who was calling for affordable and accessible licensed childcare for years. The NDP has and will continue to take action to address childcare issues and have created childcare spaces at the fastest pace in the province's history. And there's more to come. I absolutely understand that we need more spaces in Squamish. And if I'm elected your MLA, I will certainly put this on my to-do list. The NDP have created, currently there are more than 32,000 families in BC that are currently receiving childcare at $10 a day or less. That's a savings of about $16,000 per child. So this is making some big changes to families' lives. With respects to trying to get professionals up to Squamish, it's beautiful. I don't think there'll be a challenge to getting them up there. It's like the bigger challenge is having facilities up there for them to work in. And the NDP is certainly committed to expanding the $10 a day care plan and trying to get facilities built in all across the province. And I'm hoping in the Sea to Sky region as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. The next question. How does your party plan to work with our Indigenous communities in the Sea to Sky district?
Jordan, this question is over to you.
Thank you for the question. There's a long history in the Sea to Sky of working with the Indigenous nations. Clearly, two of those nations were part of the four host First Nations for the 2010 Olympics, the Squamish and the Lil'wat. There's a long partnership there that has ensured that both those nations are very much part of the decision-making process and part of managing and stewarding the land base. We see that most of the forestry tenures, for example, in the Sea to Sky have been transferred to or purchased or a combination of both from various other tenure holders and the province of British Columbia through BC Timber Sales to, for example, TFL 38, which surrounds Squamish, is owned by Squamish Forestry, which is a Squamish Nation company. There's revenue sharing agreements on virtually all of the energy projects in the Sea to Sky. The Master Development Agreement for Whistler Blackcomb has a significant partnership with the Squamish and Lil'wat nations. Frankly, it's hard to imagine how any project on the land base in the Sea to Sky would advance without the endorsement, without the support of the First Nation whose territory it is in. And so there's a long history, and we would certainly expect that history would be continued going forward, and we continue to work hand in glove in partnership with First Nations in the region.
Thank you, Jordan. The next question. We are concerned about all the development and its impact on the environment within the Sea to Sky corridor. In regards to that, what are your opinions on the development of Garibaldi at Squamish?
And Jeremy, this question is over to you.
Thank you. Good question, very relevant to Squamish, I'm sure. I've been hearing about Garibaldi at Squamish for probably a couple decades. It's yeah, I've been on the books. I understand the Squamish Lil'wat Regional District planning has been looking at it. It's maybe advanced a little bit of late. My opinion on Garibaldi at Squamish, or GAS as I've heard it referred to, is my opinion is that the Green Party looks at these things based on the evidence. So I'm sure the conditions are always changing for Garibaldi at Squamish between climate change and economic conditions, tourism forecasts, and its interaction with the rest of the corridor, and all those things need to be taken into account. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, I can't say at this time, but I can say that, like every issue, as your MLA, I would deeply dive into the details and listen to all the opinions on it, and fulfill be part of the provincial government's or the province's role in making that decision whether it should go forward or not. I think these long-term projects, some of which may never happen or may not be economically feasible, they tend to divide communities, and so does overdevelopment. And I think it's important to facilitate those discussions so that they don't become something that divides a community apart. And there's another three-letter acronym called LNG that's in the same boat, and I think we need to be very careful of development projects that do not where the discussion does not serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next question. Would you be in favor of bringing back photo radar, which was canceled by the Liberals under Gordon Campbell?
Keith, once again, you are top of the stack for answering questions, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. I personally, I'm against photo radar. I don't like it at all. To a certain degree, photo radar has already been brought back with intersections. I'd call them speed on green, which basically means if you're speeding through an intersection, you could get a photo radar ticket, or get a red light ticket. They use those cameras, the same cameras. But generally, in regards to having Alberta-style photo radar all over the highways, I'm personally against that. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Next question. If elected, what would your party do to support higher education and this in the Sea to Sky corridor?
Well, a question near and dear to my heart, of course. Jordan, this question is for you.
Thank you. Yes, it certainly is close to home, is it not? As we know, Quest University is an incredible institution that provides a quality of education that's virtually unparalleled, and we've seen and very innovative in its approach. And we've seen graduates from this small little university head off into some of the most prestigious universities around the world, and basically jump from an undergraduate arts degree into a very into significant other roles and opportunities. So this is an institution that we need to ensure stays in Squamish. This is an institution that we need to highlight what challenges it's faced and ensure that it's well understood how it's come to be where it is, because it frankly is under threat of disappearing. There's been much there's been some very difficult or questionable transactions around the funding of Quest University, and it very much needs to be exposed. It's under creditor protection right now, or going through a CCAA process, and that needs to be. We need good representation there so that that institution survives. But there's also Capilano University, and an opportunity for Capilano to take a greater role in post-secondary opportunities in Squamish. They have land that they have really not utilized. They did have a presence in Squamish and really haven't for the last decade, and that they need encouragement to utilize the land that they have. And
I'm sorry, Jordan, I'm afraid that is 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. It's an important issue for Squamish, and we should have access to post-secondary educational opportunities in Squamish.
Well, I certainly won't argue with that.
The next question. Due to COVID-19, the job market for newly graduated students is looking especially poor. Despite the federal government's attempts to provide student grants for volunteering, the We Charity scandal has left students hanging and the program closed prematurely. What will you do at the provincial level to support students, recent graduates, and young people to get jobs in the region? Is this a priority for your party?
And in keeping with our randomly chosen speaking order, Jeremy, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, I can't say enough about the new economy being opened up for the new people, the young people. So it's province needs to invest in young people, especially in these difficult times. Support the ability to get jobs. So the Green Party has made an announcement about a skills training program actually just today, or sorry, June 2020, and it's intended to youth community partnership intended to bring youth in the fore as part of the green recovery. I mean, it makes sense that youth will be involved in the green recovery. They are innovative. They can think outside the box. They're growing up with the specter of climate change hanging over their heads and now a pandemic. So they need to be involved in building this new economy. I need to point out that the Green Party is the party of youth. Our leader, Sonia Firstnow, is the youngest party leader. She's a fresh voice, and she engenders trust and compassion and courage, and this is exactly the kind of issue that the Green Party will fight for as highly representative of the youth of this province, who also deserve to have fulfilling work in a new economy. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. The next question is actually specifically for Keith. While all other provinces have seen insurance companies providing premium refunds and rate reductions due to fewer claims and less driving activity during the pandemic to help give back to the money to drivers in this challenging economic time, can you explain why David Eby and the NDP have refused to have ICBC give back similar savings to British Columbians and have now only committed to give the money back in May 2021 if elected?
Thank you for the question. So when it comes to ICBC, the simple truth about Crown corporations like ICBC is that they save us money. They save us money because they're not profit driven. They're all about providing high quality service to British Columbians at the lowest price possible. Which also makes me wonder why the Liberals are trying to introduce a for-profit car insurance to the province, as it is impossible to provide the same level of coverage at the same cost while making a profit. With respects to funds going back to the pockets of insurers, the NDP, when the NDP got government, ICBC was in shambles. I believe Mr. Eby called it a dumpster fire. We feel that the Liberals were intentionally ruining ICBC for the very intent to privatize it later on. The Liberals, when the Liberals were managing ICBC, they jacked rates up 36%, and they used it as their own personal piggy bank and pulled $1.2 billion out of ICBC to balance their budgets. So the reason on why you're not immediately getting monies is because the monies were taken out of ICBC by the Liberals to balance their budgets. Over the last 3.5 years, the NDP have worked tirelessly to fix ICBC, and now like the person who asked the question said, now we're in a position to be able to create a 20% deduction on people's car insurance. We've committed that any surplus that
Thank you very much, Keith. That is 2 minutes.
Goes back in drivers' pockets. I'm out.
Our next question. While all candidates agree on the importance of arts and culture, What will their parties do to support and showcase local heritage and seniors who built this community, specifically in Squamish?
Jordan, the floor is yours for this one.
Thanks. That's a great question. Especially with regard to seniors and the history that we see in Squamish, the Squamish Heritage Society, the people involved in that institution, I think need to be certainly supported. The cultural value of the history of Squamish, its unique aspects, its cross-cultural history, the history of the Sikh community in Squamish, the indigenous nations in Squamish, settlers in Squamish, how Squamish has what part it's played in the development of British Columbia, and its evolution as a community and its merging of its various parts into one is something that needs to be retained and preserved and presented in the community. And there's been many initiatives that have been associated with that. I think of from a forestry perspective, all those stumps around the Adventure Center with the history of logging in the Squamish area. These are our tourist attractions. These are educational opportunities. And these are the types of initiatives that need to be incorporated into our education system, as well as our tourism opportunities and our tourism businesses. So there's great opportunities there, and there's certainly both district and the province need to be there to support it.
Thank you, Jordan. The next question is for Jeremy. Could we please hear your opinions, Jeremy, of the LNG expansion in BC? And this question was directly worded towards Jeremy.
Thank you for that question. I'm so happy to answer it because the Greens are the only party that oppose LNG, which is clearly not the fuel of the future. It does not correspond to it does not help us meet our climate goals. In fact, it puts us back from clean BC, offset by carbon engineering or not. It is not a step in the right direction. So the Green Party is not in favor of LNG expansion in BC. Sure, I can understand the arguments that it's displacing other fuels in other parts of the world. That doesn't make it a good use of our efforts. It doesn't justify the fracking and the earthquakes and contaminated water that are a result of fracking. And in the case of this riding, it doesn't justify it doesn't justify reindustrializing Howe Sound just as it's beginning to recover. Finally, after 100 years of acid rock drainage and minerals going in from Britannia Mine and other contamination, it doesn't justify placing this in the middle of Howe Sound. It's not an appropriate use of the crown jewel. We talked about a biosphere reserve. We've talked about a natural park. This is a national park. This is clearly a very important natural asset for everyone. And climate change aside, carbon fuel of the past aside, it's not an appropriate use. So the Green Party opposes it. The other two parties are quite in favor of LNG, and that position and that distinction are very clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. The next question. We are in need of more weekend policing in Pemberton. What will you do to make this happen?
And in following our speaking order, Keith, the merry-go-round goes back to you for this question.
Thank you for that question. So certainly when it comes down to policing, those budgets are, depending on what municipality you live in, those funds are going to be coming primarily municipally if they're operating their own force. If folks are using the RCMP, then that's a different story. When it comes down to operating budgets, that's something that, you know, each community will need to assess on their needs and what they deem to be necessary. And certainly if people in the community feel that the level of policing in Squamish, I'm assuming we're talking about Squamish, or Pemberton or Whistler, anywhere along the Sea to Sky Highway, if anyone feels that the level of policing isn't good enough, then I would ask you to come to me, come to your municipalities. Certainly, we want people to feel safe in their communities. That should be a priority. It's certainly a priority for me, and I would do anything I could to try to support the community in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. The next question. Many local businesses face increasing taxes due to property tax assessments based on the highest and best use in the future rather than what the building is worth today. Do you support immediate action to end highest and best use taxation of our small businesses? What else would your party do to address prohibitive property taxes for locally owned businesses?
Jordan, over to you.
Thank you for the question. It's a good question, and it's a real challenge for small businesses anywhere where there's development pressures and high real estate costs. The highest best use taxation structure is one that is very prejudicial to small businesses and small landlords, small building owners. And what that, for those that don't understand, what it is that it is the potential of the building or the potential of the value is taxed as opposed to the actual value of the building is taxed. And so the BC Liberals have announced that and supported the concept of moving to a split assessment so that the taxation, the assessed value is consistent with the value of the land and the structure that's on the land, the improvements that are on the land, and the potential of for example, going from a one-story building to a 5-story building, that airspace potential that is currently taxed or incorporated into the assessed value for taxation purposes would be split out, and so there would be what they call a split assessment. So certainly we recognize that that is very difficult for small owners to manage, and we don't support that type of taxation structure.
Thank you very much, Jordan. We have time for one more question from the Q&A before candidate closing statements.
Thank you, Doug. Many First Nations have asked tourists not to visit their lands on Vancouver Island during the COVID-19 pandemic. How will you ensure that tourism respects the requests of First Nations? Additionally, how will you ensure tourism is safe for the residents of communities being visited?
Perhaps fittingly, our debate opens and now draws to a close with questions of tourism. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that question. I absolutely empathize with my friends in both Lillooet and Squamish Nation. We keep talking about how these are unprecedented times, pandemic times. Well, it's not unprecedented for the First Nations. They've been through this before with smallpox. So they're absolutely entitled to deny visitors. Their rights and title have to be respected. These Indigenous nations need to be able to have this say, and we need to support them. Absolutely, there is no room for elders or anybody to be lost, but there are elders. There are only, I believe, 50 or 60 elders in the Lillooet Nation who speak the language. If COVID were to get into those communities, it would be devastating culturally for those for that nation, for those people, and so we allow them to protect themselves. I've driven through Mount Currie. It is very clear, and it needs to be respected. People need to be educated that respect is paramount, and it needs to be enforced on their behalf, or allow them to enforce it within their own nation based on discussion and agreement. So it's a tragedy that for anybody who gets sick or passes away, and I think that if self-nations have that self-determination, it's better, and it's the right and just thing to do. Thank you.
That brings us to the close of our questions from the floor. As always, Squamish asks more questions than we have time for, which is one of the best parts about moderating events like this. So I'd like to thank all of you who asked your questions and those who asked unanswered questions, keeping it coming. Thank you. We apologize that we're unable to get to all of them during tonight's event. We are now, however, going to turn to the candidates for closing statements. Candidates, once again, you have 3 minutes for your closing statements. We will be following our randomly selected speaking order. So we'll hear first from Keith for the BC NDP, then Jordan for the BC Liberals, and then Jeremy for the BC Greens. And that will close out our evening. So Keith, for a 3-minute closing statement, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. John Horgan's NDP has shown British Columbians over the last 3.5 years that we can balance our budgets while making life better for all of us. Our new plan has 3 priorities: better healthcare for you and your family, affordability and security in your home and community, and 3, good jobs, livelihoods, and a clean energy future. With our plan, we can build a BC with improved public services, such as public transportation, affordable housing, and childcare. And as your MLA, I will not be silent until these improvements are made. Under our plan, we will meet the challenges of the climate crisis with a net zero emissions by 2050. And if I can speed it up anymore, I certainly will. We will put workers and small businesses at the front of our economic recovery, especially those who have been affected the most, such as tourism here in Squamish. And we will always work in partnership with Indigenous peoples towards long-lasting, meaningful reconciliation, something Indigenous peoples have not experienced and seen in a very long time. I believe instead of tax cuts, and this is something certainly I and my party totally disagree with the Liberals on. I believe that instead of tax cuts that benefit only the top 1%, we should invest that money into a recovery plan that truly benefits all British Columbians. The NDP's new Recovery Investment Fund will create jobs in communities and will go towards building more schools, jobs, childcare centers, roads, bridges, and other critical infrastructure. The NDP will also give tax credits to small businesses, and we're also moving our country-leading climate plan forward by investing in new technologies that will create better good jobs, and will benefit places like carbon engineering here in Squamish. With BC being such an expensive place to live, affordability is on people's minds a lot. The NDP will help families with children by expanding the $10 a day childcare plan and making transit free for children under 12 years old. We will continue our housing plan that has 25,000 affordable units built or on their way. And we will invest in and expand public transit, including better regional public transportation between Metro Vancouver and the Sea to Sky region.
Thank you very much, Keith. That is 3 minutes. You could wrap up that sentence.
All right. I can end there. That's fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Keith. Jordan, you have the floor for a 3-minute closing statement.
Thank you, Doug. Over the years, whether through my 3 terms as mayor of the Village of Pemberton, my time on the Regional District Board, or at the farm, those who work with me know that I'm a realist and I'm a doer. I'm concerned with results rather than ideologies. My starting place is with sound economic principles guided by social well-being and sustained by a healthy environment. Be it at the farm or as elected official or as a part of community organizations, I believe I have the experience and the knowledge to best represent the Sea to Sky. We face unprecedented challenges. The restart of the tourism economy will set the stage for managing growth in the Sea to Sky. Housing and transportation are inextricably linked. I'm committed to getting in place a regional transit service that will connect the whole corridor, because we're all in this together, and truly, when it comes to the Sea to Sky, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. As for Squamish and its reliance on the highway, the value of the transit system that connects Squamish and Vancouver with the rest of the corridor cannot be understated. And unfortunately, this was not supported by the NDP Green CASA Alliance. As the BC Liberals, we have and will again commit to revisiting the train that connects the corridor. The 2001 assessment that was done for the Olympic bid book needs to be updated, and new technology and construction methods and current costs to understand what is practical. I'm a little bit hard pressed to imagine that 300-kilometer-an-hour train that I saw a brochure for the other day, doing a pretty hard corner around Watts Point. But nonetheless, we need to understand what that means, what the technology involves, and what it also means for the communities along a line like that. BC Parks and Conservation Officer Service need far better resourcing, and certainly restriction on access to parks, especially for those of us that live in the region. It must stop. Parks should be here for all of us to enjoy, with better access, more camping opportunities, better interpretive services, and more infrastructure, along with an expanded youth ranger service. Childcare spaces, along with training opportunities for staff and integration into the education continuum, is critical. BC Liberals built an average of 3,000 spaces a year around the province over 15 years, despite the rhetoric. And so that's 45,000 spots. And despite the rhetoric, the NDP so far only have 3,500 net new over the years. We can and must do better. And Squamish needs to get to the 30 spots per 100 kids desired. And of course, these ridiculous gas prices and gouging we see in Squamish is outrageous. We should be 13 cents cheaper, and we're not. So the Fuel Transparency Act is allowed for that. The BCUC can do a deep dive. We'll have more information shortly that we'll be able to see through the problems, and hopefully, maybe perhaps for the Competition Bureau with some data. So there's much to do. I have the experience, aptitude, and energy to do it. I've been very privileged to serve as MLA for the last number of years.
Thank you very much, Jordan. That's 3 minutes. Jeremy, over to you for a closing statement.
Thank you. The Green Party, BC Green Party, can win this riding. This riding is ready to go green. People want to vote green. It's been building for at least 15 years, probably longer. As your MLA, I can be part of a new energized voice and a new politics. Greens can have an important influence on the government. So inclusive government and collaborative government is good government. Clearly, the NDP doesn't like it. So we're going through this election, which I'm very pleased to be a part of. But it's exactly the reason to send a minority back to Victoria, hold the government to account, keep environmental and social issues at the forefront, keep the government in check. So I can be a more effective MLA because I'm not forced to vote on party lines, whipped as they call it, as the other two parties are. I will vote my conscience, and I will vote what's best for the constituents of this riding, no matter what. We have an amazing new leader. It's very possible that we'll disagree, and we will work that out as adults, and we will discuss, and we will talk about evidence, and we will come to a solution. I urge you to check out Sonia First Now every day on the news to see the contrast with the leaders of the other two parties and the way that we've been doing politics for too long in this province. Functioning democracy restores faith in our ability to chart a path. And a minority government has been the model. It's been extremely successful. It was called called off a year early, not because it wasn't functioning. So I urge you to check out the trend lines for voting in this riding. It is pretty stark. If I could, show you, the Greens have been on the rise for a long time, and it is time, absolutely time. This riding thinks green. We are a model for the world. We can continue to be in environmental stewardship and sustainable thinking. And when you check out our leader Sonia First Now, when you listen to her, just please, I've spent some time with her, and she is the kind of person that engenders trust, compassion, and courage. She will lead us, she will lead the party and the caucus in the transition to a new economy. And the Greens have the opportunity to make a difference, both in this riding and in British Columbia. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. So there we have it. We've heard from the three candidates in West Vancouver Sea to Sky. It's an unusual election in a challenging time, and the burden now falls to all of us as voters to decide whom we want to represent us and whom we want to be charting the path forward for our riding and our province. BC offers more opportunities to vote than most other jurisdictions in Canada. Advanced voting will open soon. You can vote on election day. You can vote by mail. You can vote by going to the returning office in the riding, and there's still more. So there really is not an excuse for not voting. And if you didn't hear what you were hoping to hear from candidates tonight, if you have questions that are unanswered, as many of you do, reach out to the candidates. They want to hear from you, and they want to answer your questions. Democracy only works if we decide to participate. On behalf of the Squamish Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank our candidates for their time this evening. Certainly a challenging experience to be receiving questions without any prior knowledge to what they're going to be. I'd like to thank our partner organizations for participating and for framing the debate at the beginning. And I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your evening to attend. I hope you found tonight's event informative. And again, I hope you remember to cast your ballot. On behalf of Politikos Research, have a good night.